Welcome, everyone. Wanted to let you know you're in the right place for Operation Parents webinar with Kara Starnes from Safe Passage. Today, we're going to talk about how are children being trafficked without us noticing. So thank you so much for taking some time out of your afternoon to be with us today. We are getting everybody loaded in to join us. I'm just happy that you've taken time out of your busy day to be here and learn with us. We're going to let you know about a couple of upcoming webinars. The first one is a rebroadcast coming up on June the 2nd. This is with Dr. Aaron Weiner, and the topic is marijuana, the teen brain, and the impact on teen school performance. This is a rebroadcast, so I just want to remind you that we will not be live during this presentation, but it's a very popular one, and folks are wanting to see it again. So we're happy to offer that again in the evening. It's an 8 p.m. rebroadcast. And then in July, we also have Tara McGuire, who is a local Kentucky prevention expert that's going to talk about the prevention of teen alcohol abuse. The title of that presentation, if you'd like to register for it, is Parents Can't Stop What They Don't Know. I did want to let you know that this one isn't live on the website yet, but it will be very shortly. So keep an eye out for this one in July. And we're also going to do a follow-up presentation with Arlene Rice on July the 7th on opioid abuse. So again, that one's not live quite yet, but it's up and coming. So if you wanted to mark your calendar for July 20th and July 7th and come back and join us again for more learning, we would be really honored to have you. As those of you who have joined us before know our mission, but if you're brand new today, we wanted to take a minute and share it with you. Operation Parents' mission is to love and support parents, providing real-world information, connection, and most importantly, hope. I also want to take you through a couple of the features on the GoToWebinar panel so that you know how to participate with us today. There is an orange grab tab up in the right corner there. If you'd like to click on that, you're going to open up all the features on the control panel. The question feature is about halfway down the control panel, and you will see it labeled as such as questions. You will send both questions and comments here. That light blue panel in the middle is where you can type your questions and send them directly to us privately. We have an awesome set of handouts provided for you today. One is titled Talk to Your Child About Trafficking, and that has a list of several web resources on it. We have some more information about safe passages. Kara's going to tell you a lot about safe passages today, but we also provided a safe passages flyer and a safe passage brochure so you can see the additional services and education that Kara's office does. We have a PDF of today's PowerPoint, so you could download that now with us live here, or you've also got an email a couple hours before this presentation that you could download from that location later on if you'd like to. Another awesome resource that we provided is from the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. And this goes through so much of Kara's presentation. It's a summary of everything she's teaching us today, and it really does help you identify the signs and symptoms of anyone who might be a victim of child trafficking. So that's a front and back, really awesome summary that just went along so nicely with the presentation today. So I'm just reminding you that you can double click on those handouts to begin the download process while we're live. Once this webinar has ended today, you just won't be able to download from that location, but you could go back to your email and get the handouts from there as well. We are recording this presentation, and this recording will be sent in a follow-up email 24 hours after the completion of this webinar. So just give us a little bit of time to download everything and get it ready and send it to you. So give us a full 24 hours, and then you'll have that recording link in your email as well. There is a certificate of attendance attached for anyone who is joining us live here today. The email, which contains the recording link and certificate of attendance, will be sent together. So you'll have both of those things in a joint email. We're also going to send you a survey that goes out immediately following this presentation. It is a super short survey. It's only going to take you about 2 minutes to complete, but your continued support and encouragement and constructive feedback really fuels our passion for this work and is appreciated so much, and I promise you it is always utilized. Now it is really my distinct pleasure to introduce Kara Starnes from Safe Passages right here in Louisville, Kentucky. The beautiful thing is that our organizations have matching missions that are ingrained in hope. She's a fellow University of Kentucky alumni, which I love that, and she's thankfully recognized, which she's going to talk a lot to you about, that children being trafficked have had absolutely no services in this area before she began her work. And thankfully, she embraced that call to do this important work and to serve teens in our area and across the country. So welcome today, Kara. Thank you so much for what you put together for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is something that I really want to thank you for having me. This is something that I count it as a huge honor that you would have me on to your platform in front of parents, in front of educators, because the reality is this is not something at 2 p.m. or wherever you're streaming from that is something that's just easy to sign on and endure and hear about and sit through. And so I just want to say thank you for trusting me and having me, and for everyone who has come today to open your heart to this cause and for coming to take a stand against child trafficking. So a little bit about me. I am the founder of Safe Passage. I've got a lot happening. I've got a podcast where I talk about the Word of God and the Spirit of God. So I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, I've got a background in international development, grant writing, all that kind of stuff. I've worked with victims overseas, victims, domestically in the US, all that kind of stuff. So just a little bit about me. Our learning objectives are today, we're really learning about the issue of child trafficking and how we can apply this to parents, to teachers, and really paint a picture today of what's happening, how is it happening, why aren't we seeing it? And so today our learning objectives are understanding the commercial sexual exploitation of children, recognizing those signs and risk factors, really learning to tell the difference between what is myth and what is fact, how are things happening, what's kind of blown out of proportion, all that kind of stuff. And then learning ways to help prevent teens from falling prey to child trafficking. So Safe Passage, before we go into our topic today, a little bit about the organization. So we are a Christian ministry located in Louisville, Kentucky, and we are responding to the issue of child trafficking. And so a lot of people ask me, how did you get started? I'm very young, I'm 29. I got started obviously much earlier, 6-7 years ago. And for me, it started, I was working at an organization that helped women who had been trafficked. And so I was there for 3.5 years or so. And part of my work was I attended regional conferences, and I attended this one where there were 5 states involved. And so I go to this conference, and I only work with trafficked women at the time. But I thought, I should go to a session on child trafficking because we're going to start doing prevention programs in the schools. And so I should brush up on the issue of how children are being trafficked. And I did not work with children at that time. So, but what a lot of people knew about me was I had 2 cries of my heart. I had the human trafficking cause. And then on the other side of my heart, I had a huge heart, a huge cry in my heart for youth. I've always been in youth ministry. I look forward to the day I can foster children. And so I go to this session on child trafficking, and the speaker says, you know, our nation is never going to have enough housing or services for adult women who have been trafficked, but our nation has borderline zero services for children who've been trafficked. And so I sat there dumbfounded, because the two cries of my heart, they collided. And if, the two cries of my heart were human trafficking and children, and I never once asked myself, what is Kentucky doing for trafficked children? And the two cries of my heart never met. I thought, oh my goodness, no one else has ever asked themselves this question if I haven't asked myself it. And so all of a sudden, I feel an elbow like punch me, I get an elbow nudge from someone. And I look over, and the person sitting next to me is a friend. He's a detective in the state for child trafficking. And he elbow punched me, and he said, "Are you listening?" And I just said, "I'm listening. I don't know what you want me to do. I help women, not children. And I'm young and I can't get crazy, and I work for a different organization, all this stuff." And so that really, and I said, "I can't do anything. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything crazy." And I left that session. I called my boss. I said, "Can we help children?" And that led me on a 6-month, journey of research and learning what it would take to serve children in Kentucky. And here I am today doing that. And I tell you that story just to let you know, you never know where you end up and why you end up there. But an elbow nudge and someone saying, "Hey, are you listening?" can absolutely change your life, derail you for better or worse. And so today we extend that same elbow nudge to you and ask you, are you listening? And let's just see what that invitation does today. So a little bit of background on us. We have been in existence for 3 years. So we have educated over 4,000 youth about sexual abuse and child trafficking through our youth prevention program. We have trained over 5,000 professionals to recognize and respond to child trafficking. We have reached over 2,000 parents and community members with the message of awareness to prevent. And we've spent over 4 years, so longer than we've been around, on the local human trafficking task forces. So that's what we do. So our services are prevention, community training, and then family support services. And so the good news is we've been on the ground for 3 years doing prevention with youth, awareness with the community. As of 2020, praise God, something good came out of 2020. We launched our family support services. It was amazing. We actually are helping families impacted by child trafficking today. And so we provide survivor-led support services to these families. So that's a little bit about what we do and what our impact has been in the last few years. Before we head into our session, I do want to offer a trigger warning with the message of hope. So this content can be triggering even if you have not gone through something of this, likeness. And it's okay to be triggered and upset and uncomfortable, maybe feeling a little bit sick. Even if you haven't gone through something, we want you to listen to your body. And so a few techniques for walking through those difficult moments are just turn down your sound. Maybe you don't need to hear me blasting through the volume for a few seconds as you kind of collect your thoughts and all that kind of stuff. You can step away and grab a drink of water. We want you to be kind to yourself and listen to your needs. So, but in reality, I want to encourage you, because even though this can be a really hard topic, our mission is hope. And so we do not want you walking away from this session feeling paralyzed, because what happens is when you feel paralyzed and like there's nothing you can do to help, then you don't help. And we don't want you to get to that place. We want you to feel like, hey, there is something I can do, and I will do it because I know I can make a difference. So we want to equip you with the truth of what's happening, which is hard. But we also want to activate you with tools to respond and take a stand against this issue. So this is our motto, okay? We do everything through the lens of hope, because we know this just is not the end of the road with these kids. We are seeing breakthrough every day. We believe they have an entire hope-filled life ahead of them. And you and me, parents and teachers and educators and everybody who sees youth can be champions for that hope. So as we move forward in discussing, some very upsetting information, please hold on to that hope. You, teachers, parents, youth workers, community members are all in an incredible position to make a difference. So diving in, when you think of human trafficking, what comes to mind? Okay. So everything we have in our head about human trafficking, the mission is kind of to get it out of our head, lay it on the table, because most people have a very limited understanding of what human trafficking looks like. Most people are looking for victims who are kidnapped, who are held hostage, smuggled across borders, locked in basements to never see the light of day. And so this type of trafficking we see portrayed most often in, viral social media posts, Hollywood, Netflix, all that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and just address it. Does kidnapping, does smuggling, does the caging, type of human trafficking happen? It does. We are serving a few children who meet those characteristics. But in the United States, even though that does happen, in the United States, it is actually the least common form of human trafficking in the United States that teenagers are at risk for. So while kidnapping does happen in relation to human trafficking, it's actually the least common form. Teenagers are usually more at risk of being trafficked by their own family or by love interests, which we'll get into. So we are going to get into this pretty quickly today, but my goal is to help you basically broaden your understanding of what child trafficking looks like, because you need to know that no story is ever the same. So if I were to sit here and give you a formula for how to respond to human trafficking, or black and white signs of, what to look for, you would miss it almost every single time, because human trafficking doesn't happen with a formula. It's not an equation. It's a story with many interchangeable parts and pieces. And so our goal today is to open our hearts and our minds to the modern reality. And so kids are coming home. They are meeting curfew, never being kidnapped, and they're still being targeted, groomed, and trafficked. So we want you to be aware of how to prevent this. So as we ease in, a few things for you to consider and know is that human trafficking, the definition right here, is when someone is subjected to forced labor, services, or sexual activity through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And we'll talk a lot about that later. But to provide further distinction, a lot of people ask me, what is the difference between sexual abuse and sex trafficking? A lot of times, victims do not even know that. And so I get asked a lot, when does that line cross over? Well, in an abuse case, the perpetrator is abusing and using the victim, but they are not organizing or receiving a transactional benefit, okay? In a trafficking case, the perpetrators are profiting and benefiting through some type of transaction where they receive something of value, such as money or drugs. So I think that distinction is helpful. So all sex trafficking, in short, all sex trafficking is sexual abuse, but not all sexual abuse is sex trafficking. So what we're looking for is a perpetrator who's organizing transactions, receiving something of value for what they're forcing the victim to do. It's also very important to realize that when it comes to minors, we do not need evidence of force, fraud, or coercion. And we are so glad to see this exception for minors, because previously things like survival sex and child pornography could sit in this gray area, because if a kid was being threatened to lie, they're being threatened, you need to lie, you need to tell them you wanted to do XYZ. And so they go to the cop and they go to the judge and say, well, I wanted to do that. Okay, well, now they're being threatened, you don't know it, and now you don't have any evidence against things that have been inappropriately understood as survival sex and pornography of children. So we are moving away from those terms because it insinuates a child is in control and making their own choices. And so we're moving toward terms such as child sexual abuse material And this eliminates a lot of gray area for criminal justice cases to move forward, which is really good news. And so there truly is no such thing as child pornography. If someone has pornographic material of a child, this is sexual abuse. Therefore, as stated, child pornography, anyone who has that has child sexual abuse material. Because whoever is using that content, whether they're sharing it, selling it, or looking at it, it is child abuse. Okay? So I feel like whoever has that content, they're abusing a child. I hope like that's coming across, without me having to get graphic or descriptive of what's happening with that person. So whoever has sexual content of a child is abusing that child through a screen, which leads me into what we call CSEC, or the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Unfortunately, we still have cops who think child porn and survival sex is a child's choice. Like they're just like troubled teens with no morals. This is not a choice of will. It's actually due to a lack of choice. They have run out of options. They've run out of choices, and however life was set up for them, this is their survival mode, okay? So a few forms of CSEC include, you know, I have to get a little bit closer. So it's what we understand to be child prostitution or trafficking. It's what we understand to be child sex tourism, sexual activity, commercial production of child pornography, anything having to do with online transmission of a live video with a child engaged in that sexual activity. So those are some forms, and we really want people to understand that is child exploitation, that is child trafficking. There are many forms, all of them are exploitation and trafficking. So yes, child trafficking is real. We do want people to understand that. We're going to go into some of the forms today that you might not have thought of outside of kidnapping and all that kind of stuff. So this is happening to our kids, and so I want to look at some of those numbers. 12 to 17-year-olds are the majority of victims, with the average age of entry being just 12 years old. Unfortunately, every age is trafficked, even as young as infancy. We have data in our resource center that you can go and look at, that even babies, infants, toddlers are being sexually trafficked. A lot of this happens because their family is selling them. So no age is unimpacted, but the majority is around 12 to 17. So 94% of these children already have a prior history in the child welfare system. Think about that. So when they have been trafficked, okay, by the time they have been trafficked, they have already come from situations with a breakdown in the home and in the family. They've already been abused, neglected, homeless, ran away. They've already seen drugs. They've already seen crime. They've already seen violence. 94%. They've already been in group homes in the foster care system. So we do have kids that come from all backgrounds, kids that come from good homes where there never was a big issue, okay? It does happen to all types of children, all types of families, but 94% of trafficked youth already have that history with the child welfare system, with a breakdown in the family. And so what this tells us is traffickers know the majority of these kids are looking for an escape. They're looking for a better life. And that is exactly what makes them a target. They believe they can convince these children to run away and be with them because they're not running to human trafficking, they're running away from what's not working at home. And so when people say to me, I don't come across trafficked youth, I ask them, well, do you come across runaway and homeless youth? Because 1 in 3 runaway youth, we are being told by detectives, are being picked up by a trafficker within 48 hours, 2 days. In other states, that might be 1 in 7. So when people say, I don't see trafficked youth, I say, well, do you come across foster care or system involved youth? Because 94% of them, 94% of trafficked youth have that prior history in the system. So if you come across these youth, you are absolutely coming across trafficked youth. So boys are certainly trafficked. It is mostly girls. If they are boys, they're often identify as the LGBTQI person, transgender, homosexual, that kind of stuff. And so the reason there is there's a feeling of being rejected at home. There's a chance of them being marginalized, of them being cast off. And so a lot of these types of males are very vulnerable to trafficking because they're looking to be accepted. They're looking for a better life as well. And so that makes them, and they're looking for love and someone to accept them as they are. And so this makes them vulnerable to someone who promises to love them and accept them. So common risk factors include, we've talked about some of this, sexual abuse, a broken home, homelessness, neglect, running away, any type of trauma, and coming from the foster care and child welfare system. So this slide is going to be very important for educators. We have some friends at Samaritan Woman, and they do amazing research studies. We'll have them in the resource center today. But in their research, they found that most trafficked victims dropped out at the 8th grade. This is so important for educators to take note of because prevention programs are being needed younger and younger. So if the dropout rate is 8th grade, we really need to get to them before that point, right? And so before 8th grade, it's prevention. Right around 7th, 8th, 9th grade, we've suddenly come into intervention. And so we do run a prevention program, and just to let teachers know kind of some of the issues that we run into, our primary partners are 8th to 10th grade classrooms, which unfortunately actually hits after that dropout rate. And so the reason we don't go younger is because the schools tell us, oh, this is too much of a mature topic for our 6th graders, our 5th graders, all that kind of stuff. And so that's really hard to hear because from my point of view, in working with youth, this is a very thick-skinned generation. And if a teenager has a cell phone, which everyone in this generation does, if a teenager owns a cell phone, they have officially seen more than you have in your lifetime. And so the reality is this is a thick-skinned generation. They are seeing a lot. And they're very hungry for the truth. And they really are. And so if the dropout rate for traffic victims is 8th grade, it's very important for educators to know that we need to be getting to them earlier, if that makes sense. So I hope that's encouraging, even though that is hard to hear about. So I want to look at 3 categories. So these 3 categories are the 3 methods of human trafficking. So force is what a lot of people expect human trafficking to look like. So being kidnapped, thrown into back of cars, being, physically assaulted, gun to head, all that kind of stuff, caged. Fraud is another one. They expect them, especially if overseas trafficking, to be promised a job and to come here, and that doesn't pan out. And so coercion is actually where we're going to be spending a lot of our time talking today. So these are the categories, the methods a person can be trafficked. And so when you think of human trafficking, you probably think of the scenarios in the first 2 columns, because this is what the entertainment industry keeps putting in movies and TV shows. And this is what the viral social media posts tells us, okay? And so when they paint these pictures of people being kidnapped, held at gunpoint, held hostage in basements, and being tricked with false jobs, smuggled, where victims never resurface. And so those types of things, they do happen, okay, but they're the least common method for United States teenagers in the United States. And so you can probably see why so many people are missing it. They do happen, but no story is ever the same. And the coercion method is what our teens are actually most at risk for. And unfortunately, coercion is the most difficult method to catch because it flies under the radar. It's not blaringly obvious as being kidnapped or held hostage. So it involves much more manipulation, exploitation. And so when I say exploitation, what I want you to think about is a like marionette puppet, okay? The victim is the puppet, the trafficker is the puppeteer, and there's strings attached to the victim. And the trafficker knows these strings are the victim's needs, vulnerabilities, and dreams. And if I can pull on them through manipulation and exploitation, I can make the puppet do the dance I want them to do without them even realizing. And so that is what coercion feels like. It feels like your strings are being pulled, you're being forced to do a dance, you barely realize it. So the common factor across the board is that victims are usually looking for a better life. They're looking to escape their current situation. And so when you look at these three photos under the coercion method, what you're going to notice is that the trafficker has identified what the victim needs, what they're vulnerable for, and they're tugging on those. It is complex trauma, complex manipulation. So under the coercion method right here, I want you to pause on those three photos. The top photo represents teens who want drugs and alcohol. So what happens is this ends up being used as a numbing agent to control them. The middle one represents runaway and homeless youth because we talked about, depending on what state you're in, it's between 1 and 3, 1 and 7. Runaway and homeless youth encounter a trafficker within 48 hours. I've literally sat in meetings with the group homes in town who have chronic runners. They have runners every week, and they've sat me down and said, Kara, we're pretty sure traffickers hang out on the street, hang out in the apartments nearby, and look for runners at the group homes in town. And so the bottom photo represents love and teens being drawn into a trafficking relationship by false promises of love. So a fantasy relationship is portrayed for some time until trust and access are gained, and that's when the trafficking begins. So I want to keep painting those three pictures for you. So let's move into the 4 common entry points into human trafficking for a United States teenager. So we've talked a lot about the running away. That's what the bus represents. And so a lot of the kids we serve are chronic runners. And so when they run, the traffickers say, oh, you're so beautiful. Oh my goodness. You know, I know what it's like for your family to just hate you. I know where you're running. Oh yeah, I see you got a bag packed and a plan for 2 days. And you know, it's not safe out here on the streets. And you know, I get you because I've been there. I've been in your shoes. Why don't you come and stay with me and I'll take care of you? And so that's how a lot of that happens. And they give these kids hope. They give these kids love. And so a lot of cops are seeing runaway teenagers doing survival sex, child pornography, and the reality is a trafficker picked them up, knew they were vulnerable, and said, hey, I know it's hard to get a job, but you can do this. And you know what? I'll help you do it, and I'll make sure you're safe while you're doing it. That might be hard to hear. So the house represents family trafficking. And we might go into this in a minute, but actually let's circle back to that in just a minute. The social media, the phone. So a lot of these kids are being picked up on Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Kick, video games. And we'll kind of circle back to this. I want to point out, especially for boys as well, they're getting picked up in some of the chat rooms here. And so what can be terrifying in the classrooms of my kids, there's a level of equipping them and terrifying them, a healthy measure. And I tell them straight, I'm like, hey, when you are talking to a cute 16-year-old girl who you think you know, because her profile's full and dated 3 months back. So she has a profile, it's dated 3 months back, it's full of photos and videos, and so you think she's a real person. So she starts messaging Joe. So Sarah looks like she's 16. Joe is a real boy. He's 16. Sarah messages Joe. They hit it off online. They like each other. They're in different states. They can't meet. So they start sexting, which is sexual texting. They send images and videos and having a sexual relationship over text. And so every day Sarah uploads new content and privately messages him. And so he thinks, yeah, she's a real girl. She sends me new naked photos every day. Well, 3 months later, Sarah stops talking to Joe. Okay. And what happened was Joe was catfished by a 50-year-old in Russia, a man. And so now what happened was this was Vladimir in Russia originally catfished Sarah and built a fake profile off of Sarah's information. And then she recycled Sarah's information to then poach a boy. Okay. And so now he has 3 months worth of content on Joe, does the same thing, builds what looks like to be a real profile dated for 3 months of, steals his Instagram images and all that kind of stuff. Then he goes to a new girl in a new state, and Joe starts messaging Hannah. Okay. And it all recycles. Okay. And so there's a healthy measure of me terrifying our children in the prevention classrooms. But that is happening. Okay. And the FBI has a hard time pulling this stuff down because then they can use it to poach other kids, sell it on Pornhub, sell it on Craigslist, all this kind of stuff. So the alcoholic photo, the party photo, represents teens who want to experiment with drugs and alcohol. And so what's happening is they want to party, they want to do drugs, they want to drink, all this kind of stuff. And the trafficker, who's 23, says, you know what? Yeah, I've got a party going on. Come to my house. We'll keep you safe. All this kind of stuff. It's not safe to experiment on your own. We'll make sure you're safe and all this kind of stuff. You don't know what they're lacing into it. We'll make sure we provide you the good stuff. And so they lure in young girls who want to party. And so the girls get comfortable at the parties and the sex and all that kind of stuff. And the traffickers start switching out substances and controlling them, and then introducing them to a looser lifestyle so that when the trafficking begins, they're already so ashamed of where they are. They're already not going to reach out to mom for help because they already know they're in trouble. And so these traffickers lure a lot of girls who want to experiment, and then what happens is they get them on drugs. And so when the trafficking situation and the abuse evolves, they're on drugs and they're not thinking straight, right? And when you're addicted, and you know you can't get drugs anywhere else, and your trafficker is the source, but you have to have your drug because now you're addicted, it's a whole layered thing, okay? So moving into breaking down family trafficking and Romeo trafficking, these are the two top ones of how we see our kids being trafficked. In the family home, we see this a lot with families who are addicted to drugs. And what happens is there's drugs, there's addiction, there's homelessness, and there's unemployment. And it is all interrelated, because if you have a drug addiction, you can't maintain a job. And without maintaining a job and you can't earn money, how do you maintain your addiction? And so we see, unfortunately, a lot of families, especially in Kentucky where we have an opioid epidemic, a lot of families pimping out their children. Okay. And so what happens is on occasion, families sell their children away. That doesn't happen often. It does happen sometimes, but usually what they're doing is opening their home a few hours a day and saying, you can do whatever you want to my child behind closed doors for the next hour as long as I get what I need for my drugs. Okay. So unfortunately in Kentucky, we do see a lot of family trafficking. The other one is Romeo trafficking. And so this probably reminds you of Romeo and Juliet. And so this happens through targeting and grooming. So someone has convinced the victim that they will love them, okay, and provide for them. And so they make all these false promises to a very vulnerable youth who wants a daddy, who wants a boyfriend, who's never had true love, who's never had anything given to them in life. So we know that 94% of these trafficked youth have a previous history in the foster care and child welfare system. So if you've been abused, okay, if you've never been loved for or cared for, and there's already a breakdown in the family, and someone comes along and promises you a better life, sometimes that youth is already looking for an escape. And so they're hoping to find that in this person. And so it's called Romeo trafficking because they basically get these victims to think that this person really loves you. And what happens is you develop true feelings for this person, and you'll do anything and you'll go a very long way because you love someone, okay? And so when you've been through multiple foster homes and you don't have any roots and all that kind of stuff, and someone comes along and convinces you of all your fantasies and they can provide for your dreams, all of a sudden people don't have to traffic, or kidnap kids anymore. They don't have to kidnap kids anymore because kids are willingly walking out of their homes and into the hands of traffickers. So targeting a victim, we're going to kind of go through some of the ways youth are being targeted. So we've talked about this, but traffickers are targeting victims they assess to be someone they can gain control over. And so where do you think they are targeting this generation's youth? Social media. Because, kids today, all of them are in the same place at the same time, right here. And so think about this. 20 years ago, if someone wanted to traffic a child, okay, they had to work really, really hard to do that. They had to leave their house and go into public and work very hard to traffic a child without getting caught. Today, it has just never been easier to hurt a child, traffic a child, whatever, because they can spend hours a day messaging hundreds of kids on social media and seeing which one bites, all right? And so what they're doing is they're messaging hundreds of kids. And so I have to talk to my students, and I say, out of 100 kids they messaged, you're the only one who responded, and they're saying things like, you're so beautiful, and if you just say thanks, guess what? 99 kids did not respond. You responded, and that leaves an open door for them to keep coming back to you. And so I ask my kids all the time in the classrooms, I'm like, raise your hands if you've ever gotten a naked photo of someone's junk on the internet. They private messaged you with a naked photo. Hands go up in the classroom. But I say, what did you do? Well, we blocked him. Awesome. You know what a predator is. A predator is not the same as a trafficker. A predator plays a very short game. They get the high they need by sending their own junk to your child, and it's done. A trafficker plays a very long game in an unsuspecting manner. They become your favorite person, someone who's your greatest support. You're so beautiful. You look like a really fun person. I used to go to your school, and I'm going to the football game on Friday. Do you want to sit together? Very unsuspecting. And so what happens is over time they develop a relationship and emotional attachment. This child develops that emotional attachment. And so they're checking in with this victim, how's your day? Oh, did your mom come down hard on you again? Are you upset? Well, you know what? Let me take you out to eat, and let me take you to the movies. Let me take you to the nail salon. I'll make you feel better. And so they become the most supportive person in their life. Okay, they have a bond. Nothing bad has happened for months, 3 months. It's the best relationship they've ever had. And what the trafficker is doing is gaining this child's trust and information, because when they know your vulnerabilities, when they know your dreams and what makes you tick, they can start to control you and manipulate you. And so when they start filling all of your circumstantial and emotional needs, that's when the isolation can begin, okay? And so what happens is they become the answer to all of your problems. And so this is your most favorite person in your life, okay? And so they create time to be alone with you. So the trafficker has a major role and begins to distance the victim from their community, okay? And this is why they don't have to kidnap the victim, because all they have to do is leverage the special bond that you now have. And what they do is they say things like, you know what, your family doesn't get you like I get you. Your friends don't see you like I see you. No one loves you like I love you. And so, why are you spending time with them anyway? You should be with me. And so they begin to isolate them without the victim even knowing. And that is when the abuse can begin, because they've driven you away from your whole support system. So kids are meeting curfew and still being trafficked. They're being trafficked on the weekends, being sold until 11 p.m. and coming home, providing pornographic images and videos that are being sold to buyers on Snapchat. And so we kind of went through that example. And so no story is ever the same. I hope that's what you've learned today. It might be a lot of information to process and sit on, but I really wanted to show you all the ways it's happening in person, on social media, in the home, not in the home, all that kind of stuff. No story is ever the same. And that's what we really want you to realize is, and to have your eyes open and your hearts open to the many different ways this is occurring. So we want to rethread some misconceptions to their modern realities, okay? The common misconceptions about human trafficking, they're not, inherently wrong, but they are being improperly plugged into more realistic scenarios, okay? And that causes us to miss the mark, okay, a lot. And so we are going to rethread those misconceptions to a more modern reality. And so I'm going to talk about invisible chains. And so what I did was I Googled human trafficking, and on the left side are those results. And so the left side is what people have in their head about human trafficking. Very often the only thing they have in their head about human trafficking. In the anti-human trafficking field, the photos on the left, we actually consider the use of these photos as a bad practice. I would not use these on our social media in our trainings, except as an example. This is a inaccurate kind of perception of human trafficking, just because it can be misleading to what you need to be looking for. And on the right is a more appropriate expectation of what you can be looking for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from left to right and rethread those a little bit. So where you are looking for kids to be kidnapped and taken, we want you to look for them to be kidnapped and taken by love and false promises. Where you're looking for kids to be shackled, we want you to look for them to be shackled by drugs, alcohol, and trauma. Where you're looking for kids to be held hostage, we want you to look for them to be held hostage by violence and fear. So these are invisible chains, what we just went through. Kids are being held in their situations by crippling manipulation, vulnerabilities, addictions, needs, and real fears. Fears that are there because the trafficker has already scared them and beat them into compliance and submission. So why do victims stay? Very often when a victim leaves, it could be the last day of their life. We do help children and families impacted by child trafficking exploitation. What I'm about to tell you is a real story. We have a girl that we are supporting with our support services who basically said, I didn't want to do what he told me to do, but I saw him kill 3 people in front of my own eyes. And so when he said, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill you, I had no reason not to believe him. So I did it. A lot of times, these victims are being abused, and they're scared of, if I leave, if I report, listen, he hurts me when I'm useful to him. Okay, I'm a product to him and he hurts his product. If he hurts me when I'm useful to him, how much worse will he do to me when now I'm a threat to him and he wants to get rid of me? And so we just need to understand there's a lot of layers here on this slide that you see, but very often people are like, she's just a bad girl with no moral, she's in a toxic relationship, she's on the street, she just wants to do this. No, they're terrified. And you don't see that because if they reach out for help, or if they don't perform, or if they sell out their trafficker, they've already been hurt. They're scared they're going to be killed. So before we go into the signs of human trafficking, I want to talk about the risk factors. We certainly should be aware of human trafficking signs, looking for them, but I need you to realize that by the time we are looking for signs, by the time we're looking at signs, we have reached crisis mode. If we can spot risk factors, which are preliminary red flags that show a teen is becoming a great risk, then we can entirely prevent human trafficking from occurring. So this tree represents a psychological study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACE. And in very simple terms, ACE tells us that if we experience trauma in our childhood, and if we don't get help for that trauma, then we are likely to re-experience similar trauma in our adulthood. And so nearly every single human trafficking victim was sexually abused in their childhood. So what we're seeing is a thread, or a loop, between childhood trauma and human trafficking. So this is something that we really want to understand. You know, one time I was working with women who had been trafficked, okay, and you know, one of the women walked up to me, and she's a full-grown woman, and she walks up to me and she said, "Today, in our program, the director helped me to realize my boyfriend was trafficking me. I didn't know he was my trafficker." And this is a 30-year-old woman who had been trafficked for 10 years. And how does that happen? How does someone not know they're being trafficked? Well, if at 4 years old, your daddy says, "I love you," and sexually abuses you, you think that's what love does. And so then when you're a teenager and all your boyfriends say, "I love you, but I'm going to hurt you, and I'm going to mistreat you, and I'm going to control you and use you," you, at this point in your life, do not know that love does no harm. You don't know what true love is, and you think that anyone who loves you can hurt you and use you. And so that's how human trafficking victims don't realize they're being trafficked, is they have a lifetime of trauma, you know, behind them, and they've never known anything else. And so by the time they've been through childhood abuse, so many times from so many different people, that line becomes so blurred. By the time human trafficking occurs, they don't recognize any difference with that. So just something to be aware of. We really want to look at childhood trauma, risk factors, and all that kind of stuff. So people, when they ask me, "Hey, what should I be looking for?" I tell them, you know, two things, okay? You should be looking for the symptomatic signs, okay? But again, looking at those risk factors. So again, people are only taught to look for the symptomatic signs, while all along the risk factors were pointing big red arrows at a developing situation. And that is why teachers, foster care parents, anyone who works with youth, anyone who's a frontline responder, hospitals, law enforcement, all that kind of stuff are so important, because if we can spot risk factors, we can totally prevent it. We can stop an evolving situation. That's what we want to do. So here are some of those risk factors. We've been kind of talking about them all along today. But let's go into, let's take a look at some of the signs at this point. So some signs and red flags that could be indicators of child trafficking happening are a child having a stash of hotel service business cards, key cards, a lot of condoms, a lot of cash, or multiple cell phones. And so this paints a very clear picture that there is a side business, a side hustle occurring that requires all of those tools. So that shows you they're in the hotels, they're managing clients, they're having lots of sex, they're getting paid for it. The multiple cell phones, we'll talk about that in just a minute, all that kind of stuff. If a child has new clothing, electronics, or items of value, when people are like, "What are your top signs for human trafficking?" This one. So what happens is, if a child shows up and they have a new outfit, a new purse, some new makeup, a new cell phone, and I know their parents don't provide those kinds of things, and I know they don't get an allowance, and I know they quit working at Subway 3 months ago, I know that's a really suspicious how they came into those luxury items. And so if you're like, oh girl, you're looking good, you're looking decked out, how, has it your birthday? Who got, is that a present for your mom? If she's like, no, it's my boyfriend, that is my number one red flag. And so when a trafficker is providing new clothes and makeup and purses, what they're doing is they're dressing you for the job. Okay, they're making you look pretty, they're making you look mature, all that kind of stuff. When you have a cell phone from a boyfriend that didn't come from a parent that tells you um, they need that cell phone for inappropriate purposes, there's a business transaction happening on that cell phone. So when you're grounded and mom takes your cell phone, the trafficker knows they can call you at any time by your secret phone. When your mom checks your phone for XYZ, the trafficker knows, well, her mom doesn't know about this phone. And so the new phone, the new clothing, the new luxury items are my absolute number one. So presence of an older companion who answers for the youth, inconsistent or scripted language, okay? They said their age was this, it's not this, okay? They said they went to this city. They're in a gas station and they think they're in this city, but they're totally lost. Like if their communication feels scripted, if it feels inconsistent, if they're unforthcoming about their boyfriend and all that, and his age and where he's from and what he does, all of that could be red flags. Um, Lack of identification, apparent age discrepancy, and not reluctance to explain tattoos. You have your boyfriend's name on your neck, big red flag, that's branding. Moving on to some more. So poor hygiene, anytime there are chronic health issues that point to a lifestyle of abuse, that point to drug usage, and especially health issues related to, UTIs, vaginal, rectal trauma, all that kind of stuff. Basically, that's saying, this person's having a lot of sex and no one's taking care of them and it's not safe sex. Okay, so having to go to the doctor for a UTI often, all that kind of stuff. All of those are huge red flags. So anytime we have medical issues that point to drug usage, abuse, a crazy sex life, all that kind of stuff, it's a huge red flag. If they're carrying a weapon, that shows they don't feel safe. That shows they're around unsafe people. If you're kindly, showing interest in their dating life and they're getting a little bit defensive, that could be a red flag. All that kind of stuff. Do we have some more red flags and signs, or did we go through all those? Yes, particular to girls. So went through some of these, but older, controlling boyfriend, unforthcoming, having multiple or anonymous sexual partners. If they're kind of bragging about meeting up with people on Snapchat and all that kind of stuff, you can bet they're meeting up with age inappropriate relationships. So if they have Craigslist applications on their phone, Backpage applications on their phone, those are used by traffickers to, load photos and arrange meetings. So if they have those and they're on them a lot, that they could be communicating on those apps. Obviously, the unauthorized cell phone or computer is my number one. And then if they have an Instagram or a Snapchat or a TikTok that looks basically, for lack of better words, like a prostitute, you can believe things are happening. So if you have any question, see if you can find them on social media and see what's happening there. If they're absent from school, we talked about dropouts being related to human trafficking. If they're unwilling to disclose, I was hanging out with my boyfriend, all that kind of stuff. We left town, all that kind of stuff. Big red flags there. So I hope that's really, really helpful. Some of those red flags of what you can be looking for. And so what we want to do, and we'll have some time for question and answer if you're just struggling through some of that or want to hear more pertaining to your cases and what you see. But let's move on to the hopeful section of our presentation. It's about time, because this does end in hope. We're not here today to make you upset and hopeless. We're here today to tell you there's an issue. You're the answer. You're the solution. You're the hope. And so, what can you do to help us combat child trafficking? And how can you use your influence in the community or at home to keep all of our children safe? So, whether you're a parent or professional, here are some questions. Let's start by asking ourselves. Okay. So, number one, and this can be whether you have a child or you just have children in your work environment or whatever, if you have nieces, nephew, do I know a child that displays any of the signs or red flags that we discussed today? Number two, do I know a child that displays some of the risk factors that we learned about today? Number three, do I know a child that has a phone? So anyone who thought they were like in the clear and are now totally freaked out by the last question, it's really not meant to scare you. It's meant to equip you, because this exercise, it tells you that, while some kids are more at risk than others, truly because of our digital age, all kids are somewhat at risk. It's not hitting the panic mode. It's just being aware. So when I was a kid, my church, my parents, my babysitters, my school were on the ball about educating me about stranger danger, about looking before I cross the street, about not approaching vehicles I don't know, about not talking to people on the sidewalk that are telling me, oh, your mom told me to pick you up. It's an emergency. You need to get in the car. I was taught that. That was relevant to my generation. Today, we need to understand what is relevant to our children and return the favor to them. Because I remember watching DVD. Nope. I'm still kind of young. The VHS, is that's what it's called? I remember watching those about stranger danger and all that kind of stuff. We need to provide the same measure of education to our children on social media safety, on talking to strangers on social media, on sexting people we don't know and we don't have a connection to, and on being loose of people being loose around people we don't know. So those are some of the things we need to return the favor for to our children in this generation. Before we go into some more things, I want to show you the bark. That's where we're at. So this is bark. At this point, I've probably thoroughly terrified anyone who's a parent, okay? Bark is a family monitoring device. And so if you collect, I hope this isn't offensive, I'm just giving you advice. If you collect your child's phone at 9 p.m., guess what? They know how to work this thing better than you. They've probably somehow scrubbed their phone of what you're monitoring for anyway. I hope that's not offensive. I hope that's helpful. Bark is a family monitoring app, and what it does is it monitors across all of your devices for things like bullying, sexual abuse, suicide, human trafficking, sexting, all that kind of stuff, all across the board. And it does the monitoring for you so that your children can talk to their boyfriend without feeling like mom is, watching their conversation at 9 p.m. when their phones are collected. I believe it's important to monitor your children's phone. I do believe that's a good practice to not let their children have their phone at nighttime. I think that's great if you're doing that. But I'm just helping you know, it can be easy to miss some things, but the Bark app we highly recommend. And it's very effective. And if you want to screenshot that, they gave us a code for our parents, and so you can get 20% off for the lifetime of that program that you have for your family. Hopefully, if I've terrified you, I've given you some relief. So moving on to or maybe the human trafficking, nope, we're moving on to professionals. So professionals, what we want to talk about is how you can help. So what you can do, whether you're okay, here we are. So the human trafficking hotline is something that you can call if you suspect child trafficking. The reason we love the human trafficking hotline is a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know if it's human trafficking, so I'm not going to report it. The human trafficking hotline helps you to, hey, I see this red flag and this red flag, and I'm concerned about this. Can you talk me through it? The human trafficking hotline, you don't have to call to report. You can call and they'll kind of have a professional walk you through what you're seeing. And so you don't have to wait to call when you know it's trafficking. Call it even if you suspect. And it's very important that the professionals know today, as adults, any adult is a mandated reporter. if you suspect child trafficking or child abuse or child neglect. And so the language there is if you suspect, you do need to report. And states have their local abuse hotline. And so we want you to know that you can call the human trafficking hotline, but you will also need to call your local child abuse and neglect hotline, which is different for every state. So just some practical advice for you today. So whether you're a parent, teacher, or professional, here's how you can help. Number one, you can stay tuned into your team. That actually does a lot, okay? If you know what looks normal, okay, you'll know when it changes. And you'll know, hey, this wasn't like this last semester, this wasn't like this last month. There's a sudden change that I need to be paying attention to and asking some questions about. Keep the warning signs in mind. We talked about that today, and seek help if necessary. So this is the very short version of what you can do, but we're going to talk more specifically about each group we have on here today. Professionals, here are a few things that you can do. Knowing the signs. Awesome. Already knocked that out today. So knowing the signs helps you to know if it could be happening. The Vera screening tool is our favorite tool. It's nationally recognized, utilized. We'll have our resource center on the screen later today that you can go to, and the Vera screening tool is provided there. The Vera screening tool, why I hype it up is it's a very long screening tool, and they encourage you to tailor it to what you already have. If you're a therapist and you already have a screening and intake, they don't tell you, oh, you need to do the Vera screening tool as is. They tell you, oh no, just sprinkle it into your current intake process, how it works for you. So the Vera screening tool is adaptable. They encourage you to tailor it into your current tools, and that's why we like it so much. And the first few pages come with a little bit of education and instructions on how to use it if you're not a human trafficking professional. So if you are a professional and you work with youth and you do intake and screening in any form, we do encourage you to check out the Vera screening tool. We have that in our resource center, which we'll show you soon. Know your local services and specialists. If you do come into a situation, you don't want to go, oh crap, let me Google. You want to have those beforehand. And then getting prevention programs in front of your youth is going to help as well. Teachers, a few things you can do. Again, knocked it out, nailed it. You know the signs at this point. You can also host a training for teachers and the education personnel. And so you want all of your co-workers to understand, be on the same page. So we have some self-paced trainings in our resource center that we've linked that you can provide. If you don't have a local resource that can train your school, you can reach out to us, and we might consider distant trainings. We do that sometimes, but we do have to prioritize our local trainings. But if you just absolutely don't have a human trafficking professional in your area and you want to train your school, we have done virtual trainings for schools. You can always inquire, but it's kind of case by case if we can provide that for you. And then bringing prevention into the classroom. Here's the thing, I want to sit on teachers for a minute. You are really on the front line, and you are the gatekeeper of information for your students, okay? Where parents fail, you can make up for it, right? And so you really are a gatekeeper for information. And so you see a large amount of youth, you're able to talk to them about real life issues. You might be the only healthy, supportive role model in their life, and you truly are a bridge to at-risk youth. And so a few things to remember are, if you observe any sudden change in behavior, things that just aren't the same, don't look right, a change in dress or communication, suddenly children are not forthcoming about their life, all that kind of stuff. If they're being picked up by cars that are not a family vehicle, that are an older boyfriend, if they're skipping school, if they appear to have an inappropriate age relationship, all of those are huge red flags, and you're probably going to see them first and notice a developing situation. So I just want to encourage teachers, you really are, you have eyes where it matters most, the daily ins and outs of these kids, and bringing those prevention programs into the classroom. You truly are a gatekeeper and bridge to our students. If you know, we do provide prevention programs in Louisville, Kentucky, to the schools. If you don't have a local prevention program, our resource center has a DIY, a do-it-yourself prevention program for teachers. You don't have to be a human trafficking expert. You can lead very easy exercises in your own classroom about human trafficking without being an expert, without a lot of training, and if you don't have a local group in your city. So you can find those DIY prevention courses and conversations in our resource center. So here's some conversations for parents. What we really want you to talk to your children about is social media safety, human trafficking, self-worth, and safe relationships, and teaching them about what true love looks like. It does no harm. A lot of traffickers are like, oh, don't tell anyone. Love does no harm, and love keeps no secrets. And so those are really, really important conversations to know our self-worth, to know what love looks like, so that when a counterfeit comes along, our students will know you're lying to me, that's not love. And so our resource center is fully stocked with conversation guides, videos, things you can show your children to really equip you and help you go through these conversations and not feel alone. We do want parents to make a safety plan. So a lot of these kids they get into situations where they go, oh crap, this situation doesn't feel safe. I feel uncomfortable. I feel like something's bad's gonna happen, but I snuck out and I've been drinking and I did something my parents said not to do. So I'm not gonna call them because I'm gonna disappoint them and I'm gonna be in trouble. I think it's good to make a plan with your teenager. Hey, Hannah, if you ever know there's something that it could be life or death, something that could traumatize you, hurt you, put you at risk, and you know when you call me, you're going to be in trouble, you have a hall pass, and the code is unicorn. If I know you say unicorn, I know you've made a mistake, you've gotten yourself into a trench, you need help, and we're not going to make a big deal out of it. Your life is more important than you doing what I told you not to do. So I think that can be involved in a safety plan just to help students know they can always reach out. Disappointment is a factor, consequences are a factor, but they know their life is more important. And we did talk about the Bark app. And if you missed that opportunity to screenshot, it is in our resource center. So closing up today, Operation Parent, if you did not know, has a fantabulous handbook. It is, and we highly recommend this resource to parents. I have copies. They've given us free copies that we give to our parents that we serve. And so we recommend this resource. It's a tool that really takes the burden off of you on what you need to know and how to talk to your children about it. Pages 21 and 22 cover the topic of child trafficking, and we just want to applaud Operation Parent for including that topic. They did very good. And so we want to encourage you to grab a copy from their website and to provide it to your friends as well. It's very easy to navigate. So the next few slides, we're going to go pretty quickly over. So I promised you we have a resource center that has our Bark app right there. You can screenshot that if you missed it before, and has this is only a screenshot. Our resource center, you have to scroll. It is thorough. This is only a screenshot. I just wanted to show you that when I promised conversation topics for those conversations, we really did provide those for you. So we have a few resources from some other organizations today. And again, we're going pretty quickly over these slides so you can screenshot this, but there are some really great organizations that provide research, training, services all across the nation. And we want to encourage you to get familiar with other groups that are fighting child trafficking and to keep educating yourself, learning about how you can join the cause and keep getting involved in this. And so that's something you can screenshot, but we highly recommend the work and the research of these other organizations here. Lastly, if you enjoyed your time with me, I would love for you to support our ministry pages, my personal pages. These are all the ways that you can stay connected with me, with Safe Passage. And our social media handle for Safe Passage is right there. Our website is right there. My personal stuff is there. Safe Passage is only just one cry of my heart. The other cry of my heart is writing and preaching and teaching. And so that's what I do. So I have a podcast that I'm diving into. And so If you have Spotify or YouTube or Apple iTunes and you enjoyed just hearing from my heart today, you can go and subscribe to those platforms. It's always a help to get Christian content out there into the world. When you subscribe, it boosts us into the world to reach other people, and it's a great encouragement. So you can screenshot this really quick before we move on. You're welcome to reach out and let us know what you learned about today. And I always love to hear from you guys. And so you can find us there on all those handles and websites. And so I just want to say thank you to Operation Parent for having this topic that can be very overwhelming to go through, and for trusting me to unpack all of it today. And thank you for the opportunity and open that door. And I think it's time to hand it back to you for questions and answers.
Kara, wonderful job. You went really deep on such a tough topic, and we appreciate everything you taught us today. We're going to just remind you of a couple at the beginning of the presentation. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your valuable time with us this afternoon. We're going to remind you quickly about, well, if most importantly right now, if you've got a question for Kara, she's going to stay on the line for a bit longer and answer your questions. It's one of the most enjoyable parts of our time together. So thank you so much for adding your questions in the queue while we just give you a couple more general announcements about Operation Parent. We do have ongoing webinars. So the next one coming up is a rebroadcast with Dr. Aaron Weiner, Marijuana, the Teen Brain, and the Impact on Teen Performance. Just remember, this is not live. It's a rebroadcast of a very popular program. So we hope that if you haven't seen it already, you might join us for that 8 p.m. re-airing of Dr. Aaron Weiner's presentation. And then also upcoming in July, we're going to spend some time with Tara McGuire, Kara and Tara, and talk about alcohol, preventing teen alcohol abuse. And she's a big advocate that parents really cannot stop what they don't know. So she's going to go really deep with you on how teens might be abusing alcohol or concealing alcohol, so that you can think ahead and have conversations with teens about your expectations surrounding alcohol. Um, we will have that one July 20th at 2 o'clock. It's a live webinar. So remember that registration link is not live yet, but it will be very shortly. So you can go to our upcoming webinar tabs on our webpage and register for things at any time. We'll also have up there shortly a presentation with Arlene Rice. That's going to happen on July 7th, and that is in connection and taking some time to think about opioid abuse and how to prevent that among our teens. Very exciting to let you know, if you don't already know yet, our new 8th edition parent handbook is available. As Kara mentioned, it is wonderful. It's an amazing resource to sit down with your teen and have conversations on a variety of topics and just open the door and stay ahead so that they know your expectations. They also, teens might be more aware of what they would be up against out in the culture. We have a special offer right now, 20% off of 100 handbooks or more. So if you're an organization, particularly a drug-free coalition, a school, or a church that might like to order over 100 handbooks, you can email info@operationparent.org and we will take care of you there. If you are an individual parent and interested in the handbook after today's presentation, we have a middle and high school version. Those are $11.99 each, and you can just order those directly on operationparent.org/shop. Once again, if you are new to Operation Parent, we are so excited that you have joined our community. If you've been with us for a while and you have watched, you love our content and you've watched this webinar program grow, we would ask you to consider making a donation. We have always been able to offer this webinar program free, and we'd like to continue doing that. So if you are so moved to make a donation today, we would love that. You're able to go through and do that by just clicking on the bright blue square button that's up on our webpage. It's on various places on our webpage. So please consider doing that if you enjoyed today's content and plan to join us for future webinars. All right. We'd also like you to join us. Our community is thriving on social media, Facebook and Instagram. We'd love for you to connect with us there. All right, Kara, we will get into these questions. So I did notice one that came in really early, and you touched on this a little bit in your presentation. Someone asked, what is the name of your program that you take out to schools?
So we call it Raise the Standard. That's in partnership with Refuge for Women. So that's where I worked at years ago. And so they designed a prevention program for middle and high school youth, and that talks about sexual abuse and human trafficking. So instead of reinventing the wheel, we partner with Refuge for Women. So they get like Central Kentucky, we do Western Kentucky, and we reach together several thousands of students every single year. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. What age do you start that presentation in the school system right now?
We work a lot with 8th grade, 9th grade, but we'll go as young as 6th grade if the schools are open to that. Mhm.
Okay, that's awesome. Um,
Mhm.
a second viewer asked if there is a virtual class, if Operation Parent offers virtual classes specifically for teens. And what I had shared there is that a lot of parents will have their teens just join them and rewatch the webinar if it's age appropriate content. That's one way some parents have utilized the content, or they might take the handouts and just talk through a couple of handouts. Like you've mentioned before too, we have a lot of parents that are just using the handbook and flipping to that particular topic in the handbook, and just at least kicking off the conversation with their teen that way.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I'm just double checking here for a couple more questions. Okay, somebody asked, first of all, you got a lot of thank yous for the
Aw.
information and all of your time in the queue, most importantly. And then somebody else asked, is this going to be available on rebroadcast? And we will put this in the schedule for rebroadcast. We haven't selected a date for that yet, but it will be. But if you're live with us now, remember that you will also get the recording tomorrow. Give us like 24 hours to wrap everything up and get it back out to you, but you will get a recording of the webinar as well as a certificate for attending live. Okay, I am not currently seeing any more questions in the queue. Um, Nikki, if I missed something, let me know. Kara, if you can think of like a most frequent question you might get asked after doing your presentations, especially in schools, maybe a question that teens might ask you.
Oh man, I think the questions and answers, usually people end up talking about personal cases of like, what do you think about this? And so usually people have a lot of questions of like, my foster care is going through this, my foster care child is going through this, what do you think? But, um, you
Sure.
know, um, I think a lot of times a frequently asked question is, well, if I suspect human trafficking, how do I ask the child, are you being trafficked? Like how do you lead into that conversation? And it can be a little bit tricky, but if you just go up to a child and are like, are you being trafficked? Like most victims don't know they're victims in the first place. And so asking them, are you being trafficked? They're gonna be like, no, it's so that I understand that's a really hard conversation to open up if you're an educator, a parent, if you work in a youth service organization. It's hard to be like, are you being trafficked? So a few things that I would do is you just kind of try to uncover the layers, right? Because you know what signs to look for, and the victim doesn't realize the victim is being trafficked, and so when they say no, I'm not being trafficked, that's not going to help you in the first place because it's not dawned upon them they're being trafficked. So that question's obviously useless in the first place. So I just try to uncover layers. you know, so like how long have you known your boyfriend? What's his age? What's his field of work? How'd you get to know him? And just figuring out if they're really honest, if they kind of are unforthcoming, if you totally know the guy's 30 and they're like, oh, he's like 21, like, all that kind of stuff. If, again, if the conversation is like, oh my goodness, you have two phones, did the other one break down or what? And is the sim not working? It's like, no, this one, my boyfriend got me this one and it's just better and all this stuff. Like, it's just a big red flag. And so, a lot of people are just like, well, how do I start the conversation? You just lead with love, because here's the thing. If you don't love a child and you try to ask them about their life, they're not going to feel loved and they're just going to exit the conversation. Like, I've had people who are frontline workers and they're just like, how do I talk about this? I'm like, listen, it might be really awkward, but if you lead in love and they know you're asking questions because you love them and have an interest in their life and their safety, the worst thing that's going to happen is, man, she asked me a really awkward question, but like, they walk away going, well, she did that because she loves me, So sometimes it does get awkward. It doesn't always have to be, if you can kind of dig through layers. But if you do have to ask, like, is he making you do things like, all that kind of stuff. If it gets awkward, just ask in love. And the worst thing that's going to happen is they'll walk away being like, that was weird, but Kara loved me. So.
Yeah, yeah, that like your heart is good. It's in the right place, and just trying to dig in there and figure it out with
Yeah.
grace.
Hmm.
I love that so much, and you've given us so many red flags today to keep in the back of our mind, where we can make a difference if we start to see some of those red flags pop up. And one of our conversations that we had while we were putting the content together, you prepped me so well to just be more aware when you're in spaces where teens are leaving. Maybe it's leaving school, or they're leaving a practice, or they're leaving, um, you know, some place that you see them routinely, to pay attention to the kind of cars and specifically who the teens are leaving with. And if that might be someone different every day, or it might be a scared look on their face, or to just be more aware and pay
Hmm.
attention, to those cars at schools that teens are leaving in.
Hmm.
So thank you for priming me to be a better citizen there, and just be more aware of red flags, and also keep a lookout at our own schools
Hmm.
and practices and so on and so on.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that. I'm going to double check one more time and see. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I think you have covered everything beautifully today. And we thank you so much for
Yeah.
being with us, and we'll look forward to getting together again soon.
Awesome. Thanks everyone who joined, and it was great, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you everybody who joined. Keep parenting and keep coming back to join us for the webinar program. We'll see you soon.